Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pails, steel-toe boots.
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jaylen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do? Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report, game number 3 of the season in the books, as well as this mini road trip to start the year for the Celtics, who remain undefeated here against the Pistons, 124-118, not without a scare, not without a needed comeback late, down 6 after the Celtics squandered a 23-point lead in this game. Per usual, Sherrod, your Pistons giving the Celtics a tough time here. Scrappy.
Yeah, JB Bickerstaff squad scrapping away and staying in this game the whole way. Tough second half offensive performance for the Celtics here. I knew, Sherrod, that they were going to come down to earth a little bit. That's usually what happens when you shoot out of this world in a first half and build a massive lead early. It's tough to maintain in today's NBA. And I actually thought the Pistons did a pretty good job, keeping up with the threes, working the offensive glass, doing all those little things to stay in this game. But some great sets late by Boston. Got a couple of Drew Holiday threes after he started this game pretty quiet. He had like 2 shots about 20 minutes into his night, and he ends up playing that whole finishing stretch and tying the game before Jayson Tatum poured in a tough mid-range shot to give the Celtics a lead there before they played the foul game. And Jaylen gave them some big ones at the line there. So a test that you wanted to see. We were waiting to see when the Celtics would finally play in a crunch time or at least close game. They got that tonight. And despite some nitpicking that we'll do here, I do like how they reacted to not playing their best in the third quarter, being down Hauser, which I thought hurt them more here tonight, and then getting into a close game where they had to execute late. But what was your biggest takeaway from this one?
Well, to me, the biggest takeaway is their ability to take a punch to the face, fall down, and get back up. They've been front runners the first couple of games from the standpoint of they built this big lead, they maintained the big lead, and they won big. And so what could they do when that lead disappears and they get into a dogfight? What are they going to be able to – are they going to be able to finish? And they were able to do that, and they got a lot of big contributions. Drew Holiday had not made a shot all game long, and the next thing you know, back-to-back threes to tie the game up. You look at Drew Holiday's, profile, and that's kind of consistent with what he did in the playoffs last year. Didn't have the biggest numbers, but the shots that he made were big. Jaylen Brown, again, the way he finished the game, scoring the ball was great. But look at what he did defensively in around the 3, 4, 5 minute mark. They had that sequence of 4 consecutive, really strong plays defensively, and he was involved in all of them, whether it was a steal, deflection, forcing a Detroit shooter to lose the ball and take a hurried 30-footer as the shot clock was winding down. He did a lot of really good things, I thought, at the defensive end of the floor when the game mattered most. And, you'd be remiss if you didn't talk about Tatum and what he was able to do. Again, knocking down big shots, making big plays. Certainly it's ridiculously early to start talking about league MVP, but you can't have that conversation this early and not have Jayson Tatum in your top 2 or 3. I'd say him and Anthony Davis right now are probably playing the best basketball of any 2 players in the league right now. So a good win for the Celtics from the standpoint of it gave them the kind of test that they needed early in the season. Not great in terms of just their overall play, but in an 82-game season, Bobby, we've seen enough of this to know that you're not going to play great every night, but can you win on those nights when you're not maybe at the top of your game? And the Celtics certainly proved that against a scrappy Detroit Pistons team.
Want to get some sponsors in here before we dive deeper into the game. Sherrod, we're getting a little popping from your mic. Be careful with the rubbing there. But we'll shout out Prize Picks first. Well, Sherrod just there, and Prize Picks, it's the best place to get real money sports action, and what a great time it is for it, because tomorrow's Sunday. It's going to be a ton of football going on, and a chance for you to save yourself if you're in one of those full season leagues, everybody's hurt, or you started 1-6 like I did in one of my leagues. That gives you a fresh start, and you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as low as 4 correct picks. And you know the deal over there. We've been telling you 2 or more players creates a team. Pick more or less on their stat projections, and it's just you against the numbers over at Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with 10 million users over there. So sign up today. You can do flex play, which is great. There's injury insurance, so your lineup stays in play even if someone does get hurt in the first half of these games. So ton of football going on, basketball now as well. So go check it out and use the code CLNS to get a $50 bonus when you play a $5 lineup right now. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to get the bonus. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Go download it today and enjoy. And also game time right now. What do we got coming up? Celtics-Bucks on Monday. Big game at the Garden. Probably a little easier. It's going to be a tough ticket all year, but a little easier than opening night was to get into the Garden on Monday for a big game against Milwaukee. Next up for Boston. So go over there, check out all the seats, all the deals. Sometimes the best deal is right up until and a little bit after game time. And Monday night, if you're downtown or in the area, just keep an eye on the prices. See if you can steal a deal over there and use the code CLNS to get an additional $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply over there, so check it out. Also concerts, you got events, anything you can think of over there, along with the panoramic views of your seats. Usually some deals going on over there as well, and their upfront pricing tells you what you're going to pay right away over on the Game Time app. So check it out. It's a great experience. And again, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So let's get back into the game. Sherrod, if we're going to nitpick some performances here, I do think Jaylen fell into a bit of an ISO game in the second half. Ball didn't keep moving out of his hands at a super high rate. Credit to him for working himself out of it, staying on the offensive glass. He gets 3 offensive rebounds in this one and still ends up scoring 24 points thanks to the 10 free throw attempts he generated in this game. Shot decently from 3 as well. So he works his way out of a tough game. Or tough third quarter, I would say. Almost had that offensive foul or costly offensive foul in the fourth quarter there. So, Brown can fall into that a little bit sometimes. We saw it from him early last year before I feel like he really found his role in this offense. But this was a tough one for him here tonight, shooting, what was the final line in this one? Like 6 for
24, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, not great. Definitely not the Jaylen Brown kind of game that he certainly is looking for and the Celtics need from him. But give him credit, though. When it came time to make the big plays, to find a way to put this team over the hump and get the victory, Jaylen came up big. And that's what the really good players do. They may not play great basketball for 48 minutes, but when it's crunch time, they make the plays that have to be made. And I thought he did a good job with that. But again, you're right, Bobby. It felt as though he went back into the Jaylen, the pre-All-NBA, pre-All-Star Jaylen, where it's just dribble, 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 ISO, dribble, 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 ISO, dribble, attack. And that's not really what his game is at right now in order to be effective. He needs to be a bit more of a ball mover and recognize opportunities when he should attack. And I just didn't think he had a good game in that regard. But I thought defensively, like I said, he made the plays down the stretch and he made the free throws he needed to make, did a lot of the things in crunch time that they absolutely needed to get this win. And so, again, there's definitely the cool thing for Joe Mazzulla is these are the kind of games that it serves every purpose you want. You want to win, obviously, but you want to leave room for growth and be able to have some teachable moments going forward. And certainly there's a lot of food on the bone for Joe to talk about, between now and that Bucks game.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what Joe said after this one. I know he had some comments on the shot selection out of the Wizards game, especially early on. We ended up falling up behind by 8 in that game before working their way back into some of their flow offensively. I'll give them credit. You give Jaylen credit for working out of it, but the team as a whole, they had a shot deficit for a lot of this one. Pistons tough on the offensive glass. I knew Jalen Duren was going to give them some trouble in this one. He ends up shooting 7 for 7 with 15 points, 9 rebounds, and just a force on the offensive glass there. Jaden Ivey's able to get his own shot off. Cade Cunningham, same thing. He ends up with 21 and 10 in this one. So it's a better Detroit team. They didn't shoot amazing in this game. but better than they've been capable of in past seasons. You got Tim Hardaway now, who hit a 3 in this one. You got Malik Beasley, who went 5 for 8. He was a pretty good pickup, and Fontecchio almost stole the game from them late with a couple of threes there. So the Pistons kept up with the three-point shooting. They got to the free throw line 22 times, so they kept that margin close. But the Celtics just kept working back from these droughts, from their tougher stretches in the second half, and they ended up winning the shot totals in this game, which Joe always talks about. They ended up getting up 48 threes, so that gives them a 22-14 edge there. And, the shooting just continues for Tatum. Brown, solid night. Drew hit his 2, and Pritchard, out of this world in the first half. He almost made good on Jaylen's promise shot.
I know. And I tell you what, I mean, they're going to need that, particularly, as you pointed out earlier, with no Sam Hauser. They're going to need someone to generate some points off that bench. And Peyton was that guy. Look, he was 5 for 8. The rest of the bench, I think, was like, 1 for 3 or 1 for 4, something like that. Not a lot of bench production tonight, and other than Peyton Pritchard. And these are the kind of games where you need guys like Peyton Pritchard to really play well, because with Jaylen not being himself, with Tatum just on a ridiculously hot streak. But remember, Tatum had some foul issues there early on, and so they needed someone to give them something that's not from among their starting 5. And at some point, we'll absolutely get to Al, because this was like vintage throwback Al in terms of shot making. But on nights like this, where where one of your core guys just doesn't have that same type of pop, that same punch they're used to, you need some guys that kind of steady the ship and knock down some shots on the interim basis. And I thought they got that from Peyton Pritchard and certainly Al Horford as well.
Yeah, almost forgot about Al's performance. Another guy who stacked a lot of his points in the first half there. And it looked like this was going to be another runaway charade when they were hitting all those shots. They got to a point where I think through their first 122 threes this season, shooting 45%. So it's just been ridiculous three-point shooting. And they end this game 45% too, even as they cool down in the second half there. So for Tatum in particular, and we can hit on him since, I think it's pretty obvious that he's squarely in that MVP race here. We talked about it the other night, Sherrod, when you weren't here, but in Washington, someone asked him about it. And I feel like the last, 4 or 5 times he's gotten this question going back to last year, he's gone, I'm just trying to win. And I'm not worried about MVP. If that comes out of our winning, great. But it's not something I'm thinking about. And just a slight shift, toward embracing the race a little bit again. He said, it's always been on my list. I've accomplished a lot of the things that I want to accomplish in my career. All my idols won these different awards that I've been pursuing here. And, when he looks back at the MVPs, he said all of them have been on championship contenders. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't feel like you're sacrificing winning to go after MVP. And without just fully embracing the race and saying I'm all in on chasing MVP here, he said that you can win and go after MVP. And I want to see him do that. I think we've been looking for him to be in that, as you call it, Sherrod, top 5 Tatum mode for a longer stretch to start a season. The last 2 years, he was the leader in this race this time of year. And then some shooting inconsistency sets in, or some of the competitors shoot ahead of him in stats, or something just happens to knock Tatum further back in the race. This time around, it's not like he's in the clear lead. Davis is off to a great start, as you mentioned. Some other guys are starting to put up monster numbers to begin this year. I feel like there's like 5 or 6 guys averaging 30 to begin this year. Mm-hmm. But if this was a 3-game season, I like Tatum's chances with the stats and the production he's put up.
Well, you've got the stats, the production, and then you've got the supporting cast that he has. I mean, I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that Jayson Tatum plays with some really good players. And sometimes that is seen as a negative when you're talking about MVP chase. But when you look at the numbers that Tatum is posting, you look at the talent that's around him, it's impressive. It's even more impressive that he's playing as well as he has and putting up the numbers when you look at the type of players that he has around him. I mean, Derek White is a guy that, you look at what Derek has done this year. Derek has basically become a damn near 20-point per game scorer. Jaylen Brown, another 20-point per game scorer. You look at the impact Drew Holiday makes. You look at Al Horford. You start looking at Pritchard off the bench. And next thing you know, it's pretty surprising that you can have a guy getting you between 25 and 30 points and winning, and doing it without it being a disruption of the offensive flow.
Will that hurt him this year again? Because I feel like that hurt him last year, how good his team is and the fact that he has Brown next to him.
I don't think it's going to hurt him this year because he's already won a championship and he's put up big numbers. I think there's a time when players like Tatum are actually rewarded for being a team guy who wins at a high level. And it's not going to happen every year. It's certainly not, because the Celtics, the way they're built, they're going to be a title contender for the next 2, 3, 4 years unless they start making some massive radical roster changes. And Tatum is going to be the head of that snake every year. So I think there will come a point where Tatum will be rewarded for being the best player on the best team with the best stats. And I think that year is now, because as they pursue this second, straight championship, you start looking around at the other rosters in the NBA and the Celtics. It's not homerism to say that they've got the best team in the NBA. They won a championship. They brought everyone back from that team. And through the first 3 games, they're undefeated. And the one game that they were on the road where they were kind of on the ropes a little bit, they made all the big plays when it mattered most down the stretch to get the road win. So Tatum has positioned himself to be in that conversation, certainly after week 1. And I think we're going to be having this conversation throughout the season. I think Tatum is going to be a relatively top 5 MVP candidate all year long. And I do, if the Celtics continue to win at the level that I think they're capable of, I think it's going to be hard to look past Tatum as this year's league MVP.
Yeah, and I had a couple of notes jotted down on this because there's obviously a ton of criteria here that he's going to have to meet, and it's the stats, which he has, the shooting consistency, which he's regained to start this year, and then you get into some of the separators because it'll be a tight class. You're going to have your Lukas and all the rest up there. He finally has the narrative. I thought John made a good point with this the other night. Coming off the Olympics, coming off a summer of snubs, no finals MVP, all that stuff. You look back and what's everybody saying in the media, Sherrod? He's motivated. There's going to be some extra oomph going into this year. And that's had people talking about Tatum going into this year. And then he follows it up with this production. And so everybody's going to be saying, he came out firing after the Olympic snub, made these improvements, and just, tore the league apart this year. And then I think that leads to what you just mentioned there, him getting credit for their winning. They're going to be, if they're playing like this and pulling out games like this, where even when they play poorly, they're going to have that massive lead in the East again. They're going to potentially be the best team in the league again. So that thing last year where he might have gotten knocked because he's on the best team, there's a ton of guys around him, he's not the MVP in that case, I think that flips to he's the reason, or one of the major reasons, that they're the best team in the league, and he ends up getting credit for that this time around. This stuff usually happens a year late, right, Sherrod? Where
it does.
You look at last year and say, we probably should have given him more credit for how good the Celtics were. They won the championship, and now you give them credit a year later for repeating that.
Yeah, and let's be clear, just because, guys are clearly snubbed or have a reason to feel they were snubbed doesn't mean they're going to come back, guns a-blazing the following season and put up big numbers. I mean, look at Therese Halliburton in Indiana. I mean, he had a game the other night against
New York goose egg
where he didn't score a single damn point. I can't, and not even trying to clown him, but I can't recall the last time an all-star player, without being hurt, actually was held scoreless. Now, guys have gone games without making field goals, but they usually find a way to get to the free throw line
and
score in some capacity. But literally a big fat goose egg. And to me, it's an example of what happens when you use events of the past to lock in your focus for the future, and when you use events of the past to just talk about events of the past. I mean, it's shocking that a guy that's supposedly that good is held to a 0. And the Knicks are a good team defensively. We know that, but they're not that damn good. I mean, there's some, you have to inflict some, there have to be some self-inflicted wounds in order to put up a goose egg. I mean, think about Jayson Tatum. Can you imagine a scenario where Jayson Tatum plays a full game, does not get hurt, and doesn't score a single point? Hell no.
No,
I can't think of another player, that has been an all-star the last couple of years who would be held to something like that. I mean, he was, and I give Jayson Tatum a lot of credit because he could have easily come back this year and been the same player he was last year and put up decent numbers, but he locked in on things he had to get better at. And the Olympics, they are what they were. He's focused his mechanics and to be a better shooter. His defense, I think, is better. I mean, one of the lost components of this game that they just beat Detroit was, he comes in there. The game is tight, and one of the first big plays he makes was he has a block shot along the baseline. That was one of the keys to that stretch where the Celtics were able to get back in the game after they fell down by 6. So he's becoming a much more high impact all around player. You look at a guy like Luka, for example, who you mentioned earlier. Luka is a great scorer. You take away that, he's not really giving you a whole lot. Good playmaker, does a good job of getting, just seeing the floor and all that, but he's not giving you much of anything defensively. He had one good game against, I thought, the Celtics in the playoffs, and that was pretty much it. But that came after several months and years of being called out for being a bad defender. So Tatum, I think, is doing all those things to become someone who, when you talk about league MVP, it's not just kind of this passing comment. It becomes almost like a muscle memory thing where he's so good all around that him in that conversation, it just feels natural. It feels like, well, yeah, he's best player on the best team, putting up the best numbers. Why would you not be a top 3, top 4 league MVP candidate?
Yeah, and it feels like he's going to be in that mix this year. Tough to tell if he'll win it. He's going to have to catch some breaks, but he already is with Embiid being out of the mix to start this year. The Bucks, I'm interested to see how that looks on Monday against them. And Giannis is always going to be in that conversation, but for Jokic, another guy who's always in this conversation, another tough loss today. And I started hitting the panic button on them a little bit in the preseason, and there's some real concerns there. I think I'm interested to see how that continues, and that would obviously be, if they fade from the race, a major break for Tatum in this race, because that's probably the toughest guy to beat out of all of the competitors here is Jokic, and he still might be able to do what he does. But when you're the 6 seed, 7 seed, even if it's not your fault, it's going to be tougher to garner those votes at the end of the year. So,
well, that, Bobby, and the fact that he's won the award multiple times, I think that's going to work against him. Voters have a tendency to, unless you are putting up unprecedented numbers or your team is having an unprecedented season in terms of wins and losses, that at some point there is a pushback on giving you or that type of honor if you've won it multiple times. And so I with Jokic, I just don't think he's going to be in the top 3 this year. I think this will be the year where he may be in the top 5, but he will not be a top 3 finalist for league MVP. The team, I don't think, is good enough, and I do think that there is going to be a bit of a voter pushback on him, and primarily because he's already won it multiple times, and his numbers aren't going to be, I think, off the charts enough to where you could justify easily him being there. And like I said, Anthony Davis, Tatum, Luka, Giannis is always going to be somewhere in the mix. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be, someone to absolutely keep an eye on.
He's a big threat. Yeah.
I mean, there's as you point out, there's like 4 or 5 guys that you can legitimately see being in that top 6, top 7, top 8 conversation all season long. Even when they have a bad stretch, they're still going to be probably in that top 7, top 8 conversation.
Could LaMelo Ball get in there the way he's started?
Statistically, you can make a case for that, but that team sucks. And
they lost a tough one to Atlanta. That showed their problems. Yeah,
they did. I thought I was, watched a little bit of that game, and I thought this was one of those like watershed crossroads type games that if they have the kind of season that they're hoping to have, they'll look back. They would have looked back at that Atlanta game as kind of being almost like the catalyst of that, the starting point. And for them to not pull that thing out is disappointing. But they're going to be a scrappy team. They're going to be kind of like Detroit as far as, they're not going to be a pushover. But because of their youth, immaturity, and their best player, who is very talented, he doesn't have that all-around, I can carry the team to the playoffs type of game. And so they're going to need some other guys to step up. Because LaMelo, right now, all-star, absolutely, no question about that. Beyond that, I just don't see Charlotte, them being able to do the kind of things that you would hope. If you're a Hornets fan, you'd hope that they could do at this point.
I wasn't serious about the LaMelo thing, guy. I just hope he can put a full season together. And I am high on the Hornets this year. I hope they can figure it out. and
Charles Lee's
be in
going to
that
have to
playoff
coach his
mix.
ass off for that
He
to happen.
is. You watch that team and you're like, he has his hands full, especially when you start seeing Grant pull up the replay sign and start yelling at the ref, and Trey Mann's out there shooting every shot. It's like, oh, but they're so talented. They're such a fun team to watch. I'm going to be watching them a lot this year. By the way, Celtics play them twice next week.
Oh, are one of those games on a Tuesday?
Friday and Saturday.
Oh, damn.
Prime time. This is a different Hornets team.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, because they gotta schedule it. They have to have a Hornets game in Charlotte on a Tuesday. They gotta make that happen.
Don't worry, everybody. We're gonna get into the bench. Everybody's talking about Luke. Of course, Luke has his first bad game of the year.
You know what, Bobby? I wasn't gonna go there. Because I will say, but so you can jump into it now. I don't know if it was a situation as much as Luke had a really crappy game as it was X had a great game. I thought Exterminator was huge for them in this game. And it's not that shocking when you consider that he was in very familiar grounds. I mean, he played at Michigan State, had a lot. I mean, it was basically it was a home game on the road for him. A lot of supporters there. Same thing with Al Horford. People forget that Al Horford played 90 minutes away from Detroit in Grand Ledge, Michigan. That's where he did his high school ball. It's 90 miles or about an hour and a half drive northwest of Detroit. And so it's not shocking that Al had a good game because a lot of folks there were there specifically to see Al. But back to Luke, we're 3 games to the season. He didn't have a great game. Luke, to me, if you're using Luke as like the litmus test of whether you're going to win or
annoying.
lose, you're in trouble. To me, anything that Luke gives you is just icing on the cake. I'm not banking on him to be a significant factor or contributor to winning and losing. He simply has to make sure the ship doesn't sink. He did not play well this game. There's no doubt about that. But I don't believe Luke was the reason why Detroit was able to get back in the game. I thought there were some defensive breakdowns, and I thought, you got to give Detroit credit. I mean, their guys made plays. I mean, Duren, as you mentioned earlier, is going to be a good player. Cade Cunningham, we know, is a good player. Him and Ivy, I think, are, they're not there yet, but they look like a very talented, promising backcourt of the future in the NBA. I think they're 3 or 4 years away from being really, really good in this league. They're not there yet. They're good players, but I think for them to be really on that short list of great backcourts, they're still 3 or 4 years away from that.
Yeah, and then, not to go too far down that road, but Cade's still turning the ball over a little too much. I'm about as big of a fan of his as you can find, but I think they said he had like 15 turnovers over the last 2 games. They had a back-to-back coming into this one. So 7 a night, that killed them. Shooting still not quite where you wanted. He came into this one 33 from 3 and then goes 2 for 8. So still looking for the consistency as their leader and tone setter offensively that you're looking for now. And he is, he's young, but he's getting into his career a little bit here. They haven't helped him with the personnel by any means. Last year, a coaching disaster. So you give him some leeway here, but you do want to start to see at this point of his career a little bit more consistency. And 7 turnovers in a game like this is tough. Ivy, on the other hand, like to see the shot coming around. Like to see the aggressiveness. I thought he was a big reason they got back into this game.
He was. Boston had problems with him. They really had problems keeping him from getting to where he wanted to get to. And I don't know whether it was one of those things where, they're willing to give him certain opportunities so that Cade wouldn't or other guys wouldn't. I don't know what the strategy was specifically to deal with him, but he's a problem. Very quick. Showed the ability to score on a couple different levels. Knocked down a couple threes, which I've not been impressed with him as far as his perimeter shooting is concerned. And he chipped in, with 5 boards and 6 assists. And maybe to me, the most impressive stat that he had was just 1 turnover. And for a guy that's looking to attack and score, to only turn the ball over 1 time against a team that has as many good defenders on the wing and perimeter as Boston, this was a good game for Jayden. The key for Detroit, obviously, the key is trying to build off of this. For Boston, what do you learn from this? What are your takeaways from this that can help you as you prepare for the Bucks right around the corner?
It's the rotation question. Where are you going to go for the extra minutes, I think? Because for all the Luke hate here, and I get it, coming out of this one, the bigger problem is that you didn't get quality bench minutes as a whole in the second half. And I thought you mentioned Tatum foul trouble. That definitely threw off the rotation a little bit because there were some weird subs in the second half, weird combinations. You're still trying to do double big to get by. And Tillman Cornette, I have to look back and see if that actually went out there in the second half, but that's something you're playing a lot in this one. And I don't know if there's enough spacing with that combination. I know Tillman's hitting threes right now, but is he drawing defenders out quite yet? Probably not. And then this just hit me. It didn't hit me while I was watching the game because the rotation said, and I just figured it was what it was. I thought for sure we were going to see more Cada in this one.
That's what, Bobby. That's exactly the point I was waiting to bring up.
How do you go from 12-7 and a big roll in Washington to 0 tonight? I don't get that.
Particularly against a team whose bigs seem to match up well with them, because Detroit has young, athletic, springy bigs who are active on the glass. The only thing I can think of, Bobby, is that because of the way Al was shooting the ball in the first half, they didn't want to disrupt that rhythm that he was in. That's the only thing that would make any kind of sense why we saw no Cada. Because again, when you look at just the way that, Luke wasn't great, and you look at some of the things that Detroit was having success on, specifically offensive rebounds and things of that nature, and the way that their bigs didn't get a lot of touches, but when they did, they were impactful. I mean, as you pointed out, Duren, didn't miss a shot. Had, a really, really good game. 7 for 7.
Didn't miss one either.
Right. And so Cada, the one thing that you can always count on with Cada is he is going to be a disruptor around the rim. He may not block shots, but he's going to alter them. And if he doesn't alter or block, he's going to foul folks. So he's going to make things a little bit uncomfortable around the rim. And I thought they could have used, a 2, 3, 5 minute burst like that from someone. So I that was a little surprising. Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing I would think about is he had some defensive struggles or positioning problems against Washington, and it's just sort of part of the game now for him. I feel like he's going in the right direction on that end. I feel like you're seeing them put him in positions to succeed more often. There was a great play late in that Washington game where he's roaming and he just kind of flashed against, I think it was Koulibaly on the baseline, and Koulibaly just sees him and throws it away, and Jaylen caught it and ran the other way. So you got to let him play through some stuff to grow. And again, I'm not there. I don't see a ton of updates coming out of there, but that one's confusing to me. I'm sure Joe would have said matchups, or there was just some sort of thing. Maybe it was rotations, like you said, the way Horford was playing. But I thought you'd see at least a little bit with Hauser still down, because what's happening if you don't play Cada, you're not playing any of those backup wings. You run the starters a little longer. The bench rotation's a little tighter. And, on a road trip here early in the year with guys playing some solid minutes, I'm sure you did run into a little bit of maybe fatigue or just, lapses there that, 3 minutes without scoring or whatever it might have been. I just feel like playing deeper into your rotation is a good idea during the regular season, especially when you're looking for someone who you can start to rely on a little bit right now. And, Cada might not do everything perfectly, but for a guy like that who you're trying to develop and trust, you got to let him make some mistakes. You got to let him play through some stuff. So that one to me, I'm really puzzled about, especially with Hauser out. And, obviously tough to see Hauser not out there again for the second straight game. And, it's something like he said the other night, Sherrod. He felt it in the summer, dealt with it a little bit in the summer, just kind of woke up, didn't feel it on opening night, woke up in Washington for that game, and they knew pretty early he couldn't go, and they ruled him out pretty early today. So this one could linger a little bit. As we know, back pain can be a little troublesome.
Yeah. And to me, this is why you develop your players when you don't necessarily have minutes for them to play. For these opportunities, like this would have been, wouldn't have really been a shock if Peterson was out there. But the one thing that we saw in the preseason was the Celtics utilize those end of the bench guys, and they showed that they could play. Pritchard showed he could play. Peterson showed that he could play. Jordan Walsh, who we haven't talked about on this, he is shown that he can play at this level. And those guys are only going to get better if they get out there with opportunities to play. And I thought this was one of those games where when you have Tatum in early foul trouble. You don't have, Sam Hauser. Luke is not playing, his best game. Why not expand the rotation by one guy, whether it's Kada, whether it's Pearson, whether it's Walsh, but do something to find that balance between finding guys that you can develop in real game situations and hopefully finding a way to win. And I just thought, again, he's showing himself to be a very, very good coach, one of the best in the game, even if none of the GMs in the NBA think so. But I thought this was an opportunity for him to just really tweak that rotation a little bit and be justified in doing so against a team that you should be able to beat without necessarily having to do that. But if you got a chance to develop your guys and put them in real game situations and real pressure type moments, why wouldn't you do that? Particularly early in the season, Bobby, where, if you stumble in those moments, you still got another 79 games to get this thing right. So.
Yeah, and they found ways to play all four of those guys in Washington. So that's normally what I would say is there's three guys in front of them, and those guys ate all the minutes. And this one, I guess maybe he played smaller for longer stretches, and that cut out the fourth big man. So, but I'd like to see him. Especially now where Porzingis is out, because once Porzingis comes back and is integrating in, that's when you're not going to see any of them. So, just a small surprise from this one. I do want to shout out our contest, which is still rolling. You guys have plenty of opportunities here early this season. I can't believe we're still taking entries, but we are for a ridiculous haul. As our Twitter account says here, 3 items worth over $1,000. You're talking about a PS5 hot item. You got 2K25 with Tatum on the cover to play on it. And if you didn't have enough Tatum stuff in that package, basketball signed by Tatum. All 3 going to you if you win this contest. And all you have to do is go to clnsmedia.com/contest and do one of, a couple of options there. Support one of our sponsors, use their promo code over there. That gets you a ton of entries and, other ways to get involved over there as well. So you can get a real leg up by going over there and doing that, getting many entries, and again, having a chance to win early and often this season. So again, PS5, 2K, and a signed Jayson Tatum basketball. Go over there to clnsmedia.com/contest, and we'll tell you about the code later in the program here again. So keep watching as we roll through this game here. We'll talk a little Bucks later. We'll talk a little bit more about this game, but I want to shout out one of our sponsors here, Built. So listen up, renters, right now. Have you ever felt like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards, and that's where Built Rewards comes in. And real talk, we've all been there feeling like we're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, but here's the deal. Built Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Say goodbye to the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Built. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. So pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Just go over there and your rent game gets a major upgrade. Built points have been constantly ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. So earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/garden. That's JOINBILT. Built is BILT.com/garden. Make sure to use the URL so they know the Garden Report sent you. Joinbuilt.com/garden to start earning points with your rent payments today. And shout out to Nutrafol, back with the Garden Report this week. And if you're in that stressful season, just like all of us are, running around trying to get to practices, games, your own routine in, and along with everything you need to stay healthy. It can get tough. You back to school in some cases, whether it's for yourself or your kids, tighter work deadlines as we approach the end of the year, or start holiday preparations and other stressors. It's easy to forget about taking care of yourself. So during this busy season, one simple but effective thing you can do for yourself is to start taking Nutrafol. Are you interested in having hair that grows faster, stronger, longer, having visibly thicker volume, experiencing notably less shedding, thicker lashes and brows? All of this is possible with Nutrafol, the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1 million people. See thicker, stronger, and faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. And thinning hair is different for men and women. One-size-fits-all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas for men and women that are tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, whether postpartum, menopause, plant-based lifestyle, so you can get just what you need and get results. You can run your fingers through for a limited time over at Nutrafol. They're offering listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code GARDEN. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code GARDEN. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code GARDEN. All right, Sherrod, what else you got on this game?
Oh goodness. Well, let's get into Al. We haven't really talked much about Al on the show so far, and he was huge in the first half. Obviously, it was good to see.
It's good to see with the struggles he went through early in that preseason game, the only preseason game we saw him, a slow ramp up. You're wondering what's going on here. And now, as you said earlier, you get a vintage Al game early, and you know that this is still in him for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and you need to see that from time to time, because I think Al, he's at that point where, it's not no shade at Al, but he's not the guy that's going to go out there and get you 20 points, 7, 8 rebounds, a block or two, and 4 assists a game. That guy is not coming back. But we still know that guy is there. From every now and then, he can, conjure up that guy and bring that guy front and center to help the Celtics be successful. And so it was good to see that early on in the season, because we didn't see much of Al before the season started. And it raised a lot of questions and concerns about how much did Al, in fact, have in the tank. Were they, keeping him on the sideline to just because he just wasn't right physically, or were they just being overly cautious? And, so far it looks as though this falls into the overly cautious category, because Al, when he has played, has looked pretty good. But I thought as this game wore on, Father Time was definitely, I thought, playing a factor. Al wasn't nearly as impactful in the second half as the first. And it wasn't just the shot making. It was little things like moving the ball, putting the ball on the floor and getting to spots and forcing the defense to adjust to either what he's doing or position themselves where he had a good look at the basket. That stuff didn't really happen in the second half as much as we saw in the first. And that part of that is, again, I think Al's just an older player. But I give him a lot of credit for really stepping up, doing a lot of the things that he is capable of doing and making Detroit pay. I don't think there's any question that part of Detroit's game plan going in was to focus more on Tatum and Brown and just live with whatever Al Horford gives them.
You always know that's the case when he gets all those shots. And he had a game in Washington just a game ago where I think he only took 2 shots and scored 0 points in that game. And that's when an opponent's playing you more straight up, when Brown and Tatum have those big nights and Al Horford's not shooting as much. In this game, I think they started zone. Mm-hmm. So, you're getting shots for other guys against that zone. Guys are getting on the offensive glass. Holiday had a nice one early. So it's all about how the defense is guarding you. And I thought the Pistons did, of course, with JB Bickerstaff there, went to some different looks that required a little more passing. And credit to the Celtics, who keep that ball moving early in this season. It feels like ball movement and getting off the ball quickly and getting into the half court and, doing those multiple pass sequences, including the ones that got Holiday, those big ones late, are a bigger emphasis this time around. There's definitely more pace and pop to this offense, which in the third quarter, you saw it go the other way. And that's why they let that lead slide and got a little more stagnant in the second half.
Yeah, and that pace and pop you're talking about, it leads to the promise that this team has of being incredibly great night in and night out. Even when they're not playing their best basketball, they can still beat you badly. Al Horford, he's part of that whack-a-mole offense that the Celtics have, where the minute you think you've like limited Tatum and you limited Brown, you're giving Al Horford wide open shots and he's knocking those down. And if you find a way to play them straight up, you get games like you had in Washington where Tatum and Brown go off. And then you've got the wild card night in, night out, Derek White, who's playing some of his best basketball that isn't getting any kind of real attention. I mean, this is a guy that's getting you basically 20 points a game, and he's basically your fourth or fifth option. And he's doing it in a very quiet, silent assassin-like way, and still making big plays defensively. He had that block shot in the second half. I think it was on a Jaden Ivey drive that was just just the timing of it was flawless. And those are but that's what you expect from the best shot blocking guard in the NBA. So you start going down the roster and the guys who are playing in their top 7, top 8, and it's really hard to say, if I limit this guy, then we can win, or if I limit these two guys, we can win. They make it very difficult for teams to find success against them. Very difficult.
I'm glad you brought up the White block. Big moment in this game, and he had 3 of them. Yeah. So he's doing it again in terms of being a threat around the rim. I think he blocked multiple shots in this game around the rim, but none bigger in a tie game after missing a second chance 3 off the side of the backboard. He comes through and blocks, I think it was Harris inside, and then Tatum ends up getting fouled and hitting a couple free throws to go back up by 2 there late. So what can you say? Bad shooting night for White. Didn't get any 3s to go. But in the end, he makes a defensive play and probably the definitive play in this game in a tie game.
Yeah, and that's what you come to expect from Derek White. Just very unassuming but impactful for the Celtics. And you don't want to sound as though they've got this Larry O'Brien trophy in the bag, but it's hard not to feel as though this team is a overwhelming favorite when you look at the things that they do night in, night out. And even on nights where they don't have their A game, which tonight was one of those nights, you start going through the positives, and they consistently outweigh the negatives. I mean, Jaylen Brown had that stretch where he wasn't, he was just basically playing iso ball. Luke Cornett did not have a good game. You don't have Sam Hauser. Obviously, you know what life is without Porzingis, so you're used to that. But then you start looking at, well, how did they get this win? And then you look at little things like Derek White's block, Tatum with a block and some big free throws, Jaylen Brown settling down he had a sequence where he made 4 defensive possessions that were really good. And then you got Al Horford knocking down shots. And then all of a sudden you realize that, this wasn't a flawless game. This wasn't a perfect game. You might even call it a good game. And yet they still managed to get the victory. And that is what great teams do. They win often in spite of them not being good. They still find a way to beat you.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a full team effort to get there tonight. Drew, White, Horford, all timely moments. Shout out to Pritchard. Someone was saying we didn't give Pritchard any love. I don't think any other show has had multiple hosts saying that Pritchard could win 6th Man of the Year.
That's Bobby. I've tried to kind of keep my Peyton Pritchard enthusiasm in check because it makes people weird around us, as if as if Peyton Pritchard is not a good player. Listen, he's going to play minutes. I think this game is an example of what Peyton Pritchard means to this team. I mean, he had 19 points in 19 minutes. I mean, that's not normal. Again, I come back to the fact that this Celtics team is so insanely stacked, and yet Peyton Pritchard is still going to be in that 20, 25-minute range. And if they have the kind of season I think they have, because I think they're going to win more games this year than any Celtics team ever. I think they're going to be that good. And when you have an unprecedented season in terms of wins and losses, everyone gets way more credit and praise than they probably deserve. Peyton is going to be in that group because Peyton, his numbers aren't necessarily going to be what you expect from a 6th Man of the Year candidate. But when you look at his impact, you look at what this team will do, I think, as a group all season, it's hard to ignore that the guy coming off the bench on this incredibly stacked team is putting up really good numbers relative to the opportunities getting to play and he's impacting winning. So I'm still, Peyton, he had a rough opening game, but really, I expect Peyton to be one of the top, if not the best reserve in the NBA this year because of what I think he'll do impact-wise, more so than the numbers.
I wonder if that line has moved at all in the 6-man odds because he was starting to creep in there a little bit. You started to see him make some noise there going into the season. And
Give it another week, Bobby. Give it another week.
Not much movement there. Malik Monk, Miles McBride, early favorites in that award alongside Bandic Mathurin, who I think is starting for Indy, I want to say.
Yeah.
Right now, Naj Reid still coming off the bench for Minnesota. He's going to be tough to beat there. But after that, like Buddy Hield, Karis LeVert, it's a talented group of guys. DiVincenzo maybe, but I think Pritchard's closer than people think if he can maintain this consistency. And the tough thing for him here, second half, 1 shot attempt, 9 minutes, -9 for that bench. So they were a little tighter with the bench group in the second half and played the starters a lot more. So that limited his opportunities out there. 20 minutes for Holiday in the second half, 20 for Tatum, and then 19 each for White and Brown. Horford, the only guy that got a little relief there with Al. So a hot start for Pritchard, but they played a tighter rotation in the second half, so you didn't get the boom from him in the second half. Only 19 minutes for Pritchard in this one. I want to circle back to our giveaway because we have the code for tonight. Our producer, Jackson, just cooked it up, and here you go. We teased it earlier. Hard Hat is the code, and you're going to get 25,000 giveaway tickets instantly with the code just for watching tonight. It's the only way to get this bonus is by tuning into the show and staying the whole way. So shout out to everybody who stayed to about the hour mark here and go get your bonus. All you got to do is use that code HARDHAT and you're going to get 25,000 giveaway tickets and show the people what they're going to win, Jackson. A Tatum autograph ball, 2K, along with a PS5. So you're going to be able to play 2K 25 with Tatum on the cover on your new PS5 and hang up the Jayson Tatum autograph ball in your room. And the way it's looking for Jayson Tatum this year, Sherrod, all of this could become a little more valuable, especially the signature ball.
I mean, the assault that he has put on teams has been impressive. And the thing that I like really about the way Tatum is playing is that there's a heightened level of composure in how he's going about his business. Like he's scoring at a really good clip. And there seems to be, he doesn't seem too high or too low or too emotionally engaged, good or bad, with his play. He's just playing the game. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. And, again, I touched on this earlier. I love the fact that Tatum is playing both ends of the floor. I think his defense has been and continues to be one of the most underrated aspects of his game. Tatum is a better defender than he gets credit for. It's just that he's such a phenomenal scorer that we often forget that, he's out there doing some good things at the defensive end of the floor too. And so his ability to continue to evolve as an all-around elite talent at both ends of the floor is going to be part of the narrative for him to have a legitimate shot at this league MVP award.
Yep, and for the contest, again, Hard Hat gets you those 25,000 entries tonight, but there's other ways to get involved too over here and get additional entries. If you go to clnsmedia.com/contest, if you go over there and use the CLNS code at game time, 25,000 entries into the contest here. If you subscribe to the CLNS Media newsletter, it doesn't get much easier than that. 10,000 entries, and you even get 5,000 entries for following Celtics CLNS on X, following Game Time on X. Instagram follows, you can get 5,000 entries as well, Celtics CLNS and Game Time. And again, that secret code tonight, Hard Hat, gets you 25,000 entries over there. So you can go rack up tens and tens of thousands of entries right now over there at clnsmedia.com/contest. And to use that secret code, go to clnsmedia.com/ticket. So a ton of ways to get involved in this contest right now and really exciting prizes for that. And Celtics win 124-118 tonight. I think we've said all we need to about this one. A good way to pull a win out of what almost ended up being a bad game. 1-9 second half for Brown. Bogged down offense in the third quarter. I think the third quarter final score ended up being 31-21. Detroit, which I'd have to imagine is the fewest points by the Celtics in a quarter this year. But turn around with a 30-25 fourth quarter. We mentioned White's block, Tatum with a couple free throws, turnaround jumper that put the game out of reach, as well as Jaylen Brown at the free throw line when they went and played the free throw game late, coming through with a couple makes at the line there. So Celtics start 3-0. They're up next against the Bucks at home for a brief stop at TD Garden before going on the road again to Indiana and Charlotte next week. I want to talk about a small news item today, though, but one I think the people care about here, Sherrod. So the G League held their draft today. Rosters got finalized. Training camp's going to start next week for the G League. So we're going to see a lot of these Celtics guys head up to Maine, especially the two-way guys, I'd imagine, Davison, Peterson, Watson. And we reported it. We, put it out there that it was likely Lonnie Walker was going to join Maine's roster this year. And I guess the possibility's still there. But after the G League draft today, Boston, or Maine rather, put out their training camp lineup or roster, and Walker not on the list, did not sign with Maine here to begin their season. And were some rumblings a week ago from some of the European reporters out there that Real Madrid has some interest in him. Maybe he's just looking around and waiting for an opportunity to come up. I know the Knicks have some open roster spots that they have to fill by, I think, the end of the week or so here. So no Walker on Maine's roster, along with some things probably breaking different ways across the league and maybe even overseas at this point, has to make you think that at this point, at least for now, you're not going to see Lonnie Walker on Maine's roster to start this year after the Celtics cut him last week.
Yeah, I'm just still, to some extent, just surprised that Lonnie Walker has been as engaged with the Celtics as he has been, to be honest. When you look at the talent, you look at the need for a guy like Lonnie Walker throughout the league, for him to even be contemplating possibly being part of the Celtics family it's a surprise. It really is. So it's not a surprise that Lonnie is not on that roster, because Lonnie is a guy that, when you look at what he has done and what he has the potential to do, he should be on an NBA roster. He should be playing overseas. He should be in a situation where he's going to be on the floor, more than just spot duty, which is what he would be doing in Boston. So it's not a surprise. I think that, to me, the only thing that is surprising in all this is that Lonnie is still available. That, to me, is the biggest surprise. If he winds up on that main roster, that, to me, would be the surprise, because it feels as though, talent-wise, this is a guy that should have more options to exercise and pursue than what we've seen. So, if he winds up in Maine, that's great for the Celtics. But I don't think anyone should hold their breath on that happening, because Lonnie's in the limited time that we've seen him in Boston, and for those of us who watched him when he was in Brooklyn and in San Antonio, we know that this guy is an NBA player. He's an NBA rotational player, and that's not going to happen in Boston.
No, and I guess that shouldn't come as a huge surprise. I'm slightly surprised that he's not going to wait it out there, because I don't think staying home's a great idea if that's the way he's going to go. And we are getting so little Mike Pop in there, Sherrod, but I think he's got to sign either a deal with an NBA team in the near future here, or go overseas and go that route. And I know some teams overseas have their seasons end early. You get freed up to go back to the NBA if there's some 10-day opportunities or something like that. I just think you have to keep playing. And I know there's a notion that, all right, what's he going to prove in the G League? And I get that. But I don't think sitting home's ever a good idea. And I know he's not as old or as injury prone. Well, he's had his deal of injuries too. But what Ben Simmons did, not the same situation, but just going home and sitting down in Philadelphia that year. Jay Crowder that year in Phoenix, sitting out half of that year. I feel like sitting on the sideline is almost the beginning of the end. And I know you can still get your work in and do your routine and all of that, but you got to play, especially if you want to be ready for when that opportunity comes. If you want to prove yourself, if you want to show yourself, you got to be on a team playing somewhere. It doesn't have to be Maine. It doesn't even have to be here in the States. But I think he just needs to stay on the court if he wants to get an opportunity and be ready for an opportunity, especially because you can get a small opportunity, especially if it's later in the year, and not have a ton of minutes, not have a ton of shots, and have to show yourself capable. And again, he did a pretty good job of it here in Boston. It just came down to money It just came down to the roster space and minutes. Like you see all these guys on the bottom end of the roster, Sherrod, as we talked about here tonight. He wouldn't have been playing right now. Right. And that's the toughest thing when you're talking about paying a guy $11 million. Do you need him? Do you have minutes for him? Things could change here, but he's not the only one. O'Shea Brissett, still unsigned to begin this year. Markelle Fultz, still unsigned, as well as Crowder, who we just mentioned, among others. So teams don't need these guys right now. They don't want to pay these guys right now for one reason or another. And I think it's best to be playing somewhere. And I know Maine's not the most alluring situation, and you're not going to get a ton of money out of it. But at least you're on people's mind. Scouts are looking at you. You know, you're one of the guys who are just doing something when an opportunity arises around the league when they need someone. So I don't know where the story's going. I hope he's able to stay here in the NBA because it's really become a captivating story. I know the fans are super excited about him. And, you know, if he goes somewhere else and punches his ticket to a rotation spot or has a great redemption story, I know that's going to have a lot of Celtics fans talking about, all right, should you have kept them? Should he have made this team? And Jake Fisher did have a report today. I think he's mentioned before that the Celtics were looking into trying to move off a contract like Jaden Springer's to try to keep Walker involved here. And that could still be a possibility in February if the Celtics do end up making that decision here. But again, it's October 26th, Sherrod. I don't think you can just sit on the sideline from October to February waiting for the Celtics to figure out what they're going to do here.
No, you don't do that, but I don't think you need to necessarily be there day one of Maine's training camp. I think if you are Lonnie, you are going to play this the way I think the smart game is to wait for a little bit, see what opportunities present themselves, keep yourself in shape, and plan to, re-engage yourself in terms of on-court activity at some point, before Christmas. Just to show that you're still alive, you're still healthy. Because the one thing, Bobby, that you also have to take into account is that you want to make sure not only that you get back and show what you can do, but you want to make sure that you do that and not run the risk of re-aggravating an injury or getting hurt. Because then now all of a sudden you're really, really screwed if you're Lonnie Walker. So I understand why he will not be there for day one of Maine's training camp or any team's roster, unless it's an NBA roster with a guaranteed spot. But Bobby, think at some point in the next month or two, he will be back on some team somewhere, whether it's Maine, whether it's another NBA team, whether it's an overseas team, because I think he understands that I do at some point sooner rather than later need to remind people that I can play, but I don't have to do the full gauntlet from like now until whenever that day is. I think the smart thing for him to do is to lay low for a little bit, see what teams are looking to do. Because for all we know, Bobby, there may be teams that have reached out to him and said, look, we don't have a spot now, but we're working on a couple things to try to free something up. So just sit tight for a little bit and we'll see what we can do. And that would make a lot of sense. That would be a logical reason to not be joining Maine or anything like that. My gut tells me that that's some of why he's not actively on a roster now, that there are teams that have reached out to his camp to just say that we're looking to do some things. So just sit tight for a little bit. And if you're Lonnie Walker, that's not a hard request to turn down. It's an easy request to turn down because it's not like you've got this place and space that you can go to that's going to satisfy what you're looking for. So for him, he wants to be wanted. He wants to be somewhere that's going to give him an opportunity to play. And if that means, sitting at home working out in an empty gym for like another month or two, then you do that, because that's not a big sacrifice to make if your dream is to get back into the NBA and playing on a roster, which talent-wise he should be able to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe there's a situation right now that's saying something might break here in the near future. So just be patient and wait it out, because in my mind, the expectation was that he was going to go to Maine and join that team to start their year next week. And he's not on the roster, which could be telling of something here. So maybe something changed. Maybe this is an opportunity coming up over the next week or so here for Walker. We'll keep you updated if news does break on that front. I know, again, I'm looking at the Knicks. He was in Brooklyn last year. They have a couple of roster spots to fill here, and they just lost Landry Shamet, who's going to be out here for a little while with a shoulder injury. So comparable player, comparable skill set that maybe they'll look at to try to fill one of those slots once they are forced to. I think you can roll with 12 for like a week or so or something like that. So I'm going to keep an eye on New York on that front if there's an NBA opportunity for him, or maybe it is overseas. But Lonnie Walker not joining Maine's training camp roster. The news today in Celtics land. Next up for the Celtics after their 3-0 start here is going to be back in Boston. So we'll have coverage on site at TD Garden against the Bucks, which is a marquee matchup in the East here, Sherrod. A little bit of a new look Bucks team, though one that's still dealing with a major Chris Middleton injury. I don't think he's ready to go for Monday yet, and it's a back-to-back for the Bucks too. They're going to play in Brooklyn, I believe, tomorrow. So a chance for you to watch the Bucks ahead of Monday's game in Boston as they go against a Brooklyn team that's been pretty hapless to start this year. But without Middleton, you're talking about Lillard, Giannis, them trying to figure out their chemistry this year and start playing off each other a little bit more into year two together. A couple of new additions from the summer, underrated ones, in Taurean Prince, who's a pretty good wing defender / shooter, Gary Trent, who brings some shooting to that lineup, and Brook Lopez, who, you know, if you've been watching the NBA for even a couple of years at this point, you know what he's bringing to the table. So that's going to be a challenge. I'm interested to see how this front court that did struggle a little bit tonight against physicality, size, athleticism in Detroit does dealing with Giannis, Brook, the front court that you have there in Milwaukee. I think this could be the Celtics' toughest game or toughest start to finish game we've seen yet.
Yeah. They match up. You know, Milwaukee matches up in a way with Boston that it forces Boston to really strengthen areas that they're not great at. And as you mentioned, the physicality, that's something that, you know, I think on the, you know, Boston perimeter wise, I think are okay in that regard, but front court wise, you have to look at Milwaukee and just say that they're a much more physical team, you know, and we haven't even mentioned a guy like Bobby Portis, who I think is a major problem. That's the one guy outside of Giannis Antetokounmpo that if I'm the Celtics, I'm most concerned about, because he's a guy that can, you know, he can stretch the floor, he can bang, he can finish around the rim. He's a decent defender. So he poses a lot of potential problems for you. But again, this is another one of those games where the Celtics simply have to figure out which areas of the floor of the game they can exploit, make the most of those, and just find a way to win. I think for Jayson Tatum, I'm really looking forward to seeing how he deals with Giannis. And he's not going to be guarding him all game, but he will be matched up with him at times, and vice versa. And if Tatum is going to have a really, really strong MVP-esque candidacy, these are the kind of games that are going to jumpstart that. These are the kind of games that will absolutely add more fuel to that fire if you're able to outshine a guy that's won this award previously. So I'm looking forward to the game. I'm looking forward to that particular matchup.
I just love watching Giannis, especially when he goes at it with this team. It's always great. And the games in Boston were weird last year. The Celtics rolled early, almost like tonight, and then in the second half, the Bucks stormed back. Lillard got going, and shots started falling from Milwaukee, and they made it close late in each of those games, but too little, too late in both of them, and they actually destroyed the Celtics. Weird schedule times and some stuff like that. I think guys weren't available for the second game. But they did score 2 blowout wins over the Celtics last year, and it was obviously a transition season, changing coaches, bunch of stuff going on there, and they don't have Middleton right now, which is a tough guy to be without in rotation. But if you look at some of the stats for the Bucks through 2 games, Giannis putting up 31 a game, Lillard 29, shooting 38 on 12 threes a game. So you're going to be able to get threes up there with Boston, and Prince is hitting 83% to start. Porter shooting 50% from 3 on, you know, just a couple of attempts, but some hot starts for them, and Gary Trent 40% as well. So this is definitely, if anything, the first team that can actually shoot with the Celtics a little bit, and more importantly, get up threes at the same rate or similar rate like that Boston does.
Yeah, it would not shock me if, you know, that that NBA record of threes made by a team is shattered in this game.
I thought they were going for it tonight when they had 16 early.
Yeah, I could easily see one of these two teams making 30 or more threes easily. Because again, it's part of who they are. It's the way they play. So it'll be interesting to see how the Celtics fare against a team, as you pointed out, has similar approach to getting points that the Celtics do.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this week. It could be a bunch of close games, a lot of interesting styles coming up, physicality in the Bucks case, and a couple stars on the other side. The Pacers obviously gave the Celtics a run in that East Finals, and they're going to get them on Wednesday before they head to a high-flying, fast, young Charlotte team on Friday and Saturday next week. So a lot of good games coming up after a couple lackluster opponents this week in Washington and Detroit. But the Pistons did put up a fight. Despite that 0-3 record, they pushed the Celtics down 6 late in this game, and Celtics ended up pulling it out. Again, if you're here this late, I'll throw it to you again. Our special code for the giveaway, hard hat, right now. Go over to clnsmedia.com/contest to get involved in our giveaway. And again, those awards are PS5, Tatum signed basketball, as well as 2K25. And that code for tonight is hard hat, and along with 25,000 tickets with the code right there, or entries, you can also get involved by supporting our sponsor Game Time. You can go over to Game Time and use the code CLNS, get $20 off your first ticket purchase over there. Terms apply for that, but you're also going to get entries on top of the hard hat code here if you use that code CLNS over at Game Time. So $20 off your tickets as well as entries into this concert. You can't beat that. And support our other sponsors as well here. Prize Picks, you can use the code CLNS to get a $50 bonus when you play a $5 lineup tomorrow for football Sunday. Great time to do it, especially if your full season teams are out of the mix right now. And a shout out to Nutrafol as well. You can use the code Garden over there to get $10 off your first month subscription, as well as free shipping. A great deal to start off your journey over there with Nutrafol. And Built right now over at Built. Join Built, BILT.com/garden. You can start earning points with your rent payment by going over there and doing it through them. You use your points to get vacations and other great rewards over there when you use joinbuilt.com/garden. So go check that out as well. And that's it for our show tonight. Thanks to Sherrod for being here. Great conversation and a great game. I'm excited to go watch the World Series tonight, see how that's going. So a lot of great sports going on right now. And the Celtics are back in action on Monday. Check out Patriots coverage tomorrow over on Patriots Press Pass. Taylor and those guys will have Patriots Jets covered as the Patriots rather keep trying to build something around May. And we'll be back on Monday for your Celtics Bucks coverage. Thanks for being here tonight. And thanks again to Sherrod for hanging out. We'll see you on Monday night. Peace.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Phenomenal game.
Horford's out. I think it's an option. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.